Hey Kat, how's it going? Thanks for the vids, of course. I'm super excited about your rim shot. Yes, your rim shot. It's it's starting to get where we need it to be, and I'm sure it's probably a little frustrating because of course, you're still missing much of the time. But I would say you were getting in rim shots maybe like 50% of the time, which is way better than the last handful of weeks. And the quality of rim shot, a lot of those sounded really good. And you were missing and hitting just the rim a few times. I don't know if you actually did end up raising up your snare. You didn't mention, but whatever you did, it's at a place where it needs to be for now. And then it's just a matter of practicing it every time you sit down at the drum kit, at least for a couple minutes. It doesn't have to be long, but making sure that you're working on that rim shot every time you sit down at the drums. The consistency, as I mentioned, is so important. And then, in another 2 or 3 months, you'll be able to hit that rim shot every single time and with consistency, and it'll sound great. And then you start to throw that into the beats that and you're gonna sound better than every other drummer out there. So awesome. You remembered to look up and not look at your hand towards the end of the video. I did notice that, and you mentioned that. So just see if you can remember that, right? We don't want to be looking at it. We need to be able to feel that. You're going to miss for now regardless, whether you're looking at it or not. So you might as well just not look at it and get used to feeling it. And you're going to continue to miss, like I said, for weeks. But every week, show it to me, because I want to hold you accountable for it and make sure you're doing it, because it is, it can get boring, but it's so important. And then just, of course, just try to relax and let your left hand hit the drum as it naturally would. I still see just a little bit of like you're sort of trying to force a certain motion out of your arm and your hand. Just let it do its thing. Of course, it's going to feel a little bit different, right? When you get the rim and the head at the same time, it feels a little bit harder. It's more firm under the stick compared to just hitting the drum in the middle. And that's totally fine. You'll get used to it. So, really, you're doing great. Just keep going. And it will be frustrating. You will continue to miss. And that's totally fine. Okay, the tempo is not so important. Just keep it at 85. You can practice it without a metronome too. You don't have to practice it with a metronome. But if you choose to do that, maybe listen to the metronome first at 85, just a little bit, and get it in your body. And then turn the metronome off, just so that you're in the ballpark of 85. Because I definitely don't want it any faster than that. And it doesn't really need to be slower either. So that's a nice tempo. So, groovy. Nice work there. What else we got for today? Some new quarter note backbeat grooves. Cool. So I like what you came up with. I'm going to come around to the camera and... So I saw what you wrote, and then I wrote, well, I kind of listened to what you played, and then I transcribed it. I wrote it out, and I also looked at what you wrote, of course. You got a little confused in the writing, but no big deal. I noticed, you put your snares down a space lower than they typically are, and then scratch it out and put them up above. No big deal. In reality, you can assign the voices of the instrument wherever the heck you want. As long as, if it makes sense to you. That's fine. This is, though, like the standardized location for things. But that being said, in the real world, when I have to read music, a lot of times they're in different places. It always follows this kind of similar thing, though. Like the kick drum is always down low somewhere, the snare drum's somewhere in the middle, and the cymbals are up higher. Toms go in other places as well. I don't think have we talked about that much? Probably not. It's not a big deal. It's not confusing. But anyways, so no big deal there. I try to keep my stuff in the standardized location, and I think you probably should too. But like I said, when it comes down to it, you can put the stuff wherever you want. Okay, if you're ever writing notes for just yourself, you're free to do whatever you want, right? Because you're the only one reading it. But if you have to pass it on to somebody else to read, they could get confused if you don't use the standardized thing. Anyways, kicks were a little off, I think, just in this one. Okay, the kick you wrote differently than the way you played it here, and then the kick down here, you played it differently than you wrote it, and I'll explain. So this one up here, you played it with this extra kick drum on the end of 4, but that wasn't in your writing. I added it in when I wrote it out. This one down here, you wrote it like this, but you did not play the kick drum on beat 4 with the snare and the hi-hat at the same time. What we should do is let's keep this. I like this, so we'll keep that kick drum in there. So just write it in on yours so that you remember. And you'll end up playing it the same way that you did. And then this one, let's keep it the way that you wrote it, and you're going to have to train yourself to play that kick drum the way that you wrote it on beat 4. I like that there because we haven't come across a whole lot of that yet where we have kick, snare, and hat all at the same time. And that does come up a fair amount. So I think it's cool to leave that in there, and that'll give you a little bit of experience with having to do that because it is very common. Groovy. Okay. So I think the next step, other than just sorting out those things I just mentioned for this week, would be to put the right hand over on the bell, flip your left stick around and hit it in the middle, and maybe we can bump it up to 90. It's not that much faster. It should be cool. Here's 90. Okay. Do do ga do do ga do 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 ga do do. 1, 2, first one. And the next one. 2, 3, 4. Cool. That's kind of a cool groove. I like that, especially with the kick on 4. It's a little hard to play. Warning. So spend a little bit of time on that, because that is a little tricky. And it's a little hard to remember, too. But it's cool. That is a cool groove. Okay. So that's where we're at with that stuff for this week. Just progressing forward with that a little bit. And then what else did we have? Roughs. Okay, so Cool. They're looking much better. I think for this week, what you should focus on, and I wanted to move into something a little more interesting with this, but I'm going to make you stay on this for another week. I know it's boring, but you're so close, and I just really want to solidify this before we get away from making them as best as we can and complicating things. So basically, your let's see, your left-handed ruffs, so that's the one that starts with the right, and has the accent on the left, your left-handed ruffs, those all sounded perfect. And then your right-handed ruffs, the one that starts with the left and has the accent on the right, right-handed ruffs, those, So here's the goal. Make your right-handed ruffs sound like your left-handed ruffs. That's the goal. Your left-handed ruffs were perfect. You got it. Now just try to make your right-handed ruffs sound like your left-handed ruffs. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's confusing with things starting on different hands. But this makes sense, right? Because your left-handed ruffs, they start with the right hand. So for most of us right-handed players, that's usually the more comfortable side. It is for me, for sure. So it's always a process of trying to make the right-handed ruffs that start with the left hand as comfortable as the ones that start with the right hand. Make sense? Cool. So just work on that. So you probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time now working on your left-handed ruffs because they sound great. So you're just going to spend the bulk of your time working on your right-handed ruffs and going back and forth a little bit to just remember what it's like on your good side so that when you're working on your weak side, you know what it should sound like. Make sense? Hopefully. Groovy. Okay, so I guess that's it for this week. Let me just check my notes. Yes, that is it. Cool. All right, well, hope things are good, and I'll see you next time. Adios.